Good evening. I am Lillian Hostetter, a member of the League of Women Voters, Wayzata Plymouth area, and your moderator for the Corcoran Mayor and City Council Candidate Forum. I would like to welcome our candidates and our viewers on behalf of our hosts, the League of Women Voters, Wayzata Plymouth area. The League of Women Voters, a volunteer nonpartisan political organization, encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters. It is our purpose in sponsoring forums such as this to provide you with an opportunity to hear candidates discuss issues that are important to you. This evening's forum is provided to give you the opportunity to learn about the candidates running for Corcoran Mayor and City Council. There is never enough time to cover all of the issues in a setting such as this. If your questions were not addressed, feel free to contact the candidate directly. The rules for this evening's forum are as follows. Each candidate will be allowed a 2-minute opening statement to state their experiences, platform, and objectives. A 15-second warning signal will be given before the total time has elapsed. A question and answer period will be held following opening statements. The answers will be confined to 1 minute unless designated by the moderator. Questions will be answered by the candidates in a rotating order. A 15-second warning will be given to candidates. Candidates will also be given a 2-minute closing statement. Candidates, please finish your sentence quickly when you see the stop sign or you will be interrupted. No reference of a personal nature will be tolerated. A person's public record may be examined, but not their character. This forum is made available to encourage the voting public to focus on the issues and not on personalities. The public has been encouraged to submit questions online in advance. Questions that are unclear, hostile, or of a personal nature will not be used. Those that fall in the same general area may be consolidated. Recordings of this forum may not be used without express written approval of the League. The League of Women Voters will only allow audio and video of this event to be broadcast in its entirety, except for by media reporting on the event. Okay, now to start up the forum, our candidates are for Corcoran Mayor, Tom McKee, and Ron Thomas. For Corcoran City Council, it is Jon Bottema, George Gmach, and Manoj Thomas. Candidates for Corcoran City Council special election are Brian Lother and Jeremy Nichols. The order that I just stated will also be the order in which you will be starting your opening statements. So to start up, I will be welcoming right now for introductory remarks, Tom McKee, candidate for mayor.
Thank you. My name is Tom McKee. I've lived most of my life within a couple miles of Corcoran or in Corcoran. I've attended both Wayzata Public Schools and Plymouth Providence Academy and have a business degree from Wake Forest University, a law degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I'm now a project manager for Timco Construction based out of Plymouth. I'm running for mayor because I believe that Corcoran's at a critical juncture in its growth and developmental history. Budgetary and city planning decisions that we make now will impact the future of our city forever. We don't get a second chance. We either do it right now, or we live with the consequences forever. Do we retain our rural charm or become a haphazard patchwork of unchecked development? Corcoran needs to refocus on city planning that is assisted by experts and created with residential consensus. Currently, Corcoran has a deficient city code and a comprehensive plan that is causing problems throughout the city. The tendency to deviate from the few parts of the comprehensive plan that are correct only compounds this problem. As mayor, I will work tirelessly with the community on addressing these concerns. We need to preserve and support our existing small businesses and thoughtfully add new development that can add to and diversify our tax base without detracting what drew us all to Corcoran in the first place. Done right, following a solid city code and comprehensive plan, development can promote and be beneficial to the prosperity of our community and continue to minimize the residential property tax burden while still preserving the small town farming roots that define Corcoran. Finally, we need to regain public trust in the city. Communication between city and the residents is often non-existent or certainly not good. Communication with residents and business owners needs to be improved, but also the city needs to be proactive and engaging and working with the community on identifying and addressing their needs. Honesty, transparency, and respect are core principles that should be guiding every aspect of city government. As your mayor, I promise that they will be. Your voice will always be heard, respected, and needed. Thank you.
Thank you. And then next, Ron Thomas, candidate for Corcoran mayor.
Thank you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this forum and city staff, especially Jessica Baezi for hosting it, and all of you folks for taking the time to view it. My name is Ron Thomas. I grew up in Plymouth and attended Wayzata High School. After 4 years in the Air Force, I attended the University of Minnesota, Minnesota Institute of Technology, major in electrical engineering. My wife June and I have been residents of Corcoran since 1991. We have a hobby farm where we raised our 3 children and currently are raising various farm animals. Over the past 40 plus years, I've been employed as a design engineer, CEO of various and private companies. Most recently, I was chairman of the board of a small business located in Plymouth that was sold in March, thus putting me officially in the ranks of the retired. I serve on the finance committee and the building committee for St. Thomas the Apostle Church here in Corcoran. I've been on the Corcoran City Council for 16 years and mayor for the last 4 years. I'm running for re-election because I believe that my business experience and the background I bring to the council qualify me to contribute to the successful implementation of our comprehensive plan, both in the rural and urban areas of Corcoran. I hope that you agree with me and that you will vote for me on November 3rd or sooner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then next, we have Jon Bottema, Corcoran City Council candidate. And you are muted at this moment.
Hi, everybody. I appreciate the last 4 years that I've been able to be on City Council. I missed everybody. I can't wait to get back together again. I have 5 things I want to bring up during my introduction. One is 4 years ago, I asked during the forum, by show of hands, who likes living in Corcoran? Every single person put their hand up, and I agreed with them. I love living in this town. 2, our town government needs to be effective and efficient. Over the last 4 years, the tax rate in Corcoran has went down or stayed the same all 4 years. And that's not just me, but the rest of the council. Effective and efficient government is really important to me. Number 3 is we have to have a strong city council and strong people on the city council to stand up against overlapping governments like the Met Council and Hennepin County, who want to implement their philosophies onto our town. We need to stand up for what we believe in. Number 4, I'm an analyst by day, and I spend my time researching and thoroughly investigating the issues before us on City Council. It's very important to me. Number 5, and this is the most important thing, I've returned every phone call and every email I've gotten on City Council, and I plan to do that. It's really important that people are heard. It's really important that we stay on top of issues. It's really important that we stand up for what we believe in. It's really important that we have a government that does limited things, but does well in all of those things. It's really important to me that I love Corcoran. I love your vote. I think you should all get one of my signs. I think it would look really nice. Thank you.
And then next, George Gmach, Corcoran City Council. Gmach.
Good evening, and I'll echo the mayor's thanks for League of Women Voters for hosting this. I've been through a few of these in person, but this is the first time using Zoom. So you'll pardon me if it's a little bit awkward. I'm a retired business consultant. I grew up in Corcoran. I was raised on a dairy farm. A little bit of a 19th century experience because when I was a kid, we still had outdoor plumbing. And so Corcoran has changed a lot in those 71 years that I've been here. I was raised on a dairy farm. In 1969, I was drafted into the Army. I served with the 1st Infantry Division as a combat medic in Vietnam. When I came home, I went back to college under the GI Bill. I got a degree from the University of Minnesota. And from there moved into the work world and progressed upward to doing consulting for a number of organizations over the years. I've been involved in the city for the last 40. I was appointed to the Planning Commission in 1981 and was instrumental in implementation of the first comprehensive plan that was developed at that time. And immediately following the first year, I was asked to be the city planner. So I worked on that as an amateur city planner for a year before we actually hired somebody. I've been off and on the council. I believe in term limits, 20 years on the council, 40 years in total as a volunteer, 16 years as a firearm safety instructor with the police department. I've been through a lot of different experiences, a lot of road projects, a lot of building projects. I was instrumental in the locating of the current city hall. Also was instrumental in developing the...
Thank you very much. And then next, we will have Manoj Thomas, Corcoran City Council candidate.
Thanks to the League of Women Voters for organizing this, and good evening to all. My name is Manoj Mathew Thomas, and I typically go by Manoj Thomas. I moved into Minnesota in 2004 and have lived in the West Metro ever since. My strength is my wife, who's my rock, and my 3 kids, Matthew, Samuel, and Bella. I love being active in my community and working with my neighbors. Once we settled into Corcoran, I got involved with the city and looked for opportunities to serve. I have the honor of serving alongside the finest police force in the country as a reserve officer. Shout out to Corcoran PD. I was also appointed to the Corcoran Charter Commission earlier this year. I'm an active member of my church and volunteer among other places at St. Anne's and Holy Name. I'm also a proud member of the Corcoran Lions and Northwest JCs. In addition to my community work, I have a successful career in management, sales, and marketing. I work with data and analytics, and finding solutions is my strength. My wife operates a Christian mental health clinic serving the West Metro. Leadership in the community is a critical element of who I am. I believe the 2 virtues every leader needs to have is empathy and availability. My servant approach to leadership is rooted in the realization that decisions you make impact the livelihood and well-being of your community. Corcoran has had leaders in the past and present who have led the city with what they believe was in the best interest of the community. I believe some of these decisions taken with the best intentions have gotten away from us. I believe in working hard and live by the code, to whom much is given, much will be required. I think it is important to listen to people and understand where they're coming from and take their concerns seriously. It's important that the council exists for the residents and not the other way around. Thank you.
Thank you. And then next, Brian Lother, Corcoran City Council Special Election Candidate.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Lother. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to come before our city and share our vision for the future with you. I'd also like to invite you into my personal world for just a moment. I'd like to let you know about my wonderful wife and best friend, Jackie, who I've been married to for 46 years. I have 2 wonderful sons, 2 beautiful daughter-in-laws, and 4 of the brightest grandchildren you'll ever find. Of course, I am a little bit biased with that. Music has always been a part of our family. I attended the University of Minnesota. I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in piano performance. When I graduated from the university, I then pursued my theological training. I got a Bachelor of Arts degree in pastoral theology. After achieving that degree, I was ordained, and for the last 45 years, I've served in various pastoral roles, mostly here in the Twin Cities, but in some various parts of the country. I'm the founding pastor of Hope Community Church, located right here in Corcoran, on the corners of 130 and 116. Currently, I'm the lead pastor of the congregation. I have given my life to serve people in whatever capacity they may need. I have done this in the city of Corcoran for 23 years. Since becoming a resident of Corcoran in 1997, I've been involved in the formulation of 3 of the comprehensive plans that the city has used to guide themselves into the future. I've been appointed to multiple terms on the Charter Commission, of which I now serve as chairman. Serving on various committees, being involved in local events, and being a bridge builder are all ways that I've served the residents of our community. Most recently, I was appointed to serve on the City Council to complete the term of a vacated seat. I promise I will listen to you and will do my best to consider all sides of the issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then next we have Jeremy Nichols, Corcoran City Council Special Election Candidate.
Good evening. My name is Jeremy Nichols, and I live on Steeplechase Lane with my wife, Sarah, and 2 daughters. I've lived in this area for the last 11 years. I grew up in a city even smaller than Corcoran, just up the Stillwater in Baytown Township. My dad was the head of the town board there for 30 years, and I've seen how a well-run local government that balances the needs of all people in the city can benefit a community. Where I grew up, the dogs all ran free, the kids played in the road, and the highlight of summer was the neighbor's horses escaping and helping her catch them again. I'm running for this seat because I know that change is coming, and I know how important it is to hold on to the vision of the city despite that change. As I've been knocking on doors and meeting residents, I've become convinced that the idea of a conflict between new residents and established ones isn't a reality. The new residents that I've spoken with have mostly moved here because they wanted peaceful landscapes and a quieter, more friendly way of life. The established residents I've spoken with know that more people are coming and want that growth to happen in a way that lets Corcoran keep what has made it special. I studied at the University of Minnesota for both my bachelor's and master's degrees in engineering. I've spent over 15 years managing projects and leading teams. The teams that I lead develop new products used in drug manufacturing and life-saving medical devices. As a project manager, you learn to serve all the people affected by your project because that's what's necessary for the team to succeed together. When you favor one person or one group of people, you lose the trust of the team and the team falls apart. I've never had one of my teams fall apart because I value trust, openness, and consider all perspectives equally to try to find the best overall solutions. In Corcoran, there are over 6,000 people who are impacted by what we do. And in a time of rapid change, it is vital that we consider all sides. We need to make sure the city, its developers, businesses, residents, and other stakeholders' interests are all kept in appropriate balance. The value that I can provide to the city is a collaborative approach that puts residents' needs on the table first. I'm asking for your vote to help make sure that you have a seat at the table when it matters for your neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. And this concludes the opening statements. Next, we're going to be starting the question and answer, where the candidates will have 1 minute to answer, and it will be in a random order. For the first question, the order will be Jon Bottema, Manoj Thomas, Ron Thomas, Brian Lother, Jeremy Nichols, George Gmach, Tom McKee. And if you don't remember the order, I will say your name before you can start the answer. It's okay. Anyway, first question, what do you think are the top 3 issues facing our city in particular? How do you plan to address these? And Jon Bottema, you can go ahead and get started.
So we have a minute to discuss those. I don't know what I'm going to do with my extra time on this one. I think it's really important to balance. I grew up in the country. We all acknowledge that, you know, the city is looking at us from the east and moving in. How do we balance the values of rural America and the landowners' rights to develop their property? That probably is the #1 issue. And how we do that is carefully listening. I think we all love Corcoran. We all love its beauty. I think we focus on that. From my perspective, we need to run a tight budget. It's really important that our government is effective at what it's charged to do. and I've done that the last 4 years. I also think that we have to make sure we determine our future, and that means a strong council and strong people on it. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Manoj Thomas, please.
So the big three, the biggest issues I want to focus on are first, it's the increase of transparency in key decisions and allow more citizens input, not less. Active engagement of all residents in the civic process is essential to our future. Two, I think the planning, zoning, and development initiatives approved by the city is not in the best interest of the community. We have a very capable and talented planning commission, and the difference in priorities of the planning commission and the city council are visibly obvious at certain topics. We don't need smaller lot sizes. We don't need commercial buildings in people's backyards. This can and should be fixed. Three, I believe the city does need to get more efficient. We have to introduce technology and digitization to reduce operating costs, while at the same time enabling speed and simplicity. Our taxes are steady, but we need to provide more for it because we are not like our neighboring cities providing way more services. Thank you.
Thank you. And then next, Ron Thomas.
I believe that one of the major issue that we have, I think, is our growth, and it's manifested in a lot that's going on right now in Corcoran with the kind of the meeting of the rural and the urban communities, and that I think there's the answer to that, I think, is our comp plan. We have a really good comp plan that's been reiterated 3 times now over the last 20 years, and it really calls for a certain amount of growth in Corcoran, the MUSA area. So the eastern 1/3 of Corcoran will have MUSA, urban services, and the western 2/3 will remain open space and rural. And I think the challenge for that is to how do you maintain that rural space, open space, and still allow farmers and retired people who have owned acres of, multiple acres of property, 40 acres, 80 acres, allow them to make use of that property when the farmland in Corcoran isn't ideal, and the tax base is more than they can fund.
Thank you very much. And then next, Brian Lother.
Thank you. Well, growth is inevitable in our community. The question is, how are we going to guide it? And we have issues right now with, I believe, some of the ordinances. I believe experience is the law, the life of the law. So if my instinct tells me that something is wrong, or it just doesn't work, or if it just doesn't fit, then the law needs to be changed. And if an ordinance maybe is a little bit archaic, then we need to infuse it with some youth by changing it to more current representation of our times. If there's a loophole in some of the ordinances that have been found by some, we need to go back and fix that. So I'm committed to really working on the ordinances that we currently have to make them more current in this day and age. Many of the ordinances were written with a smaller community in mind. There's growth happening now. Also, the financial strength of our city. We have a financial plan in place that is really top notch, and we need to keep implementing that financial plan.
Thank you. And next, Jeremy Nichols.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful that we have 3 very high quality problems to talk about tonight. The first one is that the tax base is growing, but it's lagging behind demand for services. So we have to manage our services very carefully to ensure we're meeting our needs within the small budget until valuations catch up and revenues increase. The second issue that we have is many of our services are outsourced at a great expense. That makes it hard to afford other needs. So we have to be carefully responsible. But if we continue to stay as lean as we are and outsource as much as we do, we're going to create problems that we don't need to. We need to debate bringing some functions that we currently outsource into the city in order to save cost and allow people to focus on what makes Corcoran special. The third issue is there's too much conflict between city staff and the residents. The development comes in. This is tied to how the zoning issues are set up. With having high intensity uses next to low density residential neighborhoods, we're inviting conflict, and that needs to get resolved within the zoning ordinances themselves.
Thank you. And then next, George Gmach.
The greatest problem that we have right now is our regional road system that is not capable of handling the traffic loads that we're experiencing that are coming from our north and west. primarily the west area of Wright County, which developed after we shut things down in the west end of Hennepin. So we're dealing with that, and we have to deal with our regional governments and our neighbors to try to fix some of those issues. We certainly also have our own internal road issues with a fair amount of gravel that still needs to be addressed. With respect to the ordinances, I think it's appropriate that we have a regular process of going through ordinances to review the content to make sure that it's current. With respect to the ordinances, e-commerce has entered into the field, and their assumptions about commercial is not the same as it was a few years ago.
Thank you very much. And now, Tom McKee.
I think we have three major issues that are all in a way connected and interwoven. Obviously, development and balancing a growing community with maintaining Corcoran's rural nature is first and foremost the biggest thing we have going on. We have to work on updating our city code, as others have mentioned. There are a lot of issues and a lot of holes that have created headaches for residents throughout Corcoran. And these aren't necessarily new issues. Some are continuing to grow, but we need to be addressing them, and we should have been addressing them before now. We need to work on improving communication between the city and residents, which also goes back to how we do city planning and how we zone and how we update the comprehensive plan to be truly reflective of Corcoran residents. And I think third, we need to address community needs, which again is tied into communication and development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now for the next round of questions, the order will be George Gmach, Jon Bottema, Manoj Thomas, Ron Thomas, Tom McKee, Jeremy Nichols, and Brian Lother. The question is, currently, the city of Corcoran purchases water from Maple Grove. What is your position on Corcoran moving away from the current structure to developing a city water system? And we can start with you, George Gmach.
I don't have a specific position on it because, quite frankly, I don't know that it's been analyzed enough yet to figure out whether it's cost effective or not. With respect to a water system, we probably at some point in time will need to have our own in order to have the capacity. But until we get to a point where it's cheaper to have our own and we can fund it with the growth that we're sure is going to happen rather than what we think might happen, we have to be a little cautious about investing heavily in an infrastructure that might be a little bit ahead of our development. Okay.
Yep, thank you. Then next, Jon Bottema.
Yeah, that's a really detailed question, multiple moving parts. Maple Grove, anybody that gets water from Maple Grove knows that they overcharge us by a lot. They are in control of our water in Corcoran. We need to get our own water resources. We've worked with Ramsey and Rogers, and we've developed a plan on our own water. It will cause us to invest in that infrastructure. And over the long term, we've done the cost benefit analysis, and the crossover point of when we start to save money is not very far in the future. So we have to supply our own water, and we can't let Maple Grove and other areas determine where we get water and how much we pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Manoj Thomas.
So the city has water hooked up on the east side of Corcoran on the back of some of the new neighborhoods. The residents who have it are happy for it. I have interacted extensively with city residents who have not adopted city utilities and don't plan to. They don't want to. We have had constructive discussions and questions on motivation, partner agencies driving our strategy, timeline we have to follow. I believe Corcoran is not ready for a widespread adoption of these utilities, and we don't have to force the issue. We have to gradually let the city evolve instead of forcing the issue. We have to do a better job as a city to understand and drive adoption collaboratively over time versus forcing the city to change. We have to save the premium that Maple Grove charges us, but not earlier than it makes sense for us from a ROI perspective. Till it does not make sense for us to have our own plant, I don't think we need to force it, but that will require a detailed study. And right now, that's my point. And I would like to see more analysis before I take a final decision on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Then next, Ron Thomas.
Well, the issue of water is interesting. Presently, we do buy water from Maple Grove, and all development that comes in pays a infrastructure charge to Maple Grove, which is lost funds for us. Furthermore, Maple Grove has informed us that they will not supply us water in the Northeast District of Maple Grove for anything but residential development. So they will not supply water for any industrial or business enterprise that we have up there, which is an untenable situation. The city, in fact, has been working on their own system for the last year or so. We have a plan in place. We've done a test well, and the next phase of that program is to actually start building the water treatment plant and a water tower. So we're really quite far along in that process, and we have analyzed the cost benefits of it. Currently, we charge new development that comes in. We charge them double fees if they want water from Maple Grove in order to be able to recapture the infrastructure costs that we'll be looking forward to. So I think we have a good plan.
Thank you. Tom McKee, please.
Can you hear? There we go. It's definitely a huge question. And I don't think there's necessarily a blanket answer for all of Corcoran, but it certainly is going to be something that we're going to have to address eventually. I know the city has looked into some options, and there is a plan that has been discussed. Again, going back to communication, I don't think that has been presented to residents or to business owners or to people looking to come into Corcoran very well. But I think it's certainly something that needs to be addressed because we cannot continue to pay the ridiculous premium that we're paying to Maple Grove for water. And it's not a situation that long-term will serve our community.
Thank you. Jeremy Nichols.
Thank you very much. This is a really interesting question, I think, for the city to consider. It is a challenge where we need to establish our own independence and take off the Maple Grove training wheels on the utility front. We were allowed to be connected in the southeastern corner of the city. Ultimately, as we grow, it'll be a requirement that we have to be able to meet these kinds of needs of our residents, both businesses and households. So I think it's appropriate for the city to do what it's done, which is conduct a careful cost-benefit analysis and roll the system out as it makes sense to do so. I would agree with some of the other candidates that we don't want to force people as in individual homesteads to take on city water if they don't want it. But I do think that as a public utility, it is important that we have that available, just like we have to have other kinds of utilities like natural gas and electricity available.
Great. Thank you very much. And then lastly, for this question, Brian Lother.
I'm going to put on my clergy robe here for a moment. I believe we're to love our neighbor, but not necessarily be dependent upon our neighbors. And that's really what's happened with the water situation, is we are actually dependent upon Maple Grove. Price controls are basically out of our hands. We're not able to really moderate those things at all. In some sense of the word, it almost feels at times that we're held hostage by our neighbors to the east. And I think that prudence would dictate that we move forward in a wise manner, redeeming as much dollars as well as time moving forward. New development is going to require this. I would agree that existing homes should have the option of whether or not they would hook up to the water system or not. But new homes, new businesses, they all will need to have a water supply.
Great. Thank you very much. Now for the next question, the order will be Manoj Thomas, Jeremy Nichols, Brian Lother, Jon Bottema, George Gmach, Tom McKee, and Ron Thomas. The question is, what are your thoughts on the role use of the city's comprehensive plan as Corcoran moves to the future? Do you believe it should be kept as is, modified, or replaced as Corcoran changes? And you can go ahead, Manoj Thomas.
There we go. So I think the question about the comprehensive plan goes back to one of the topics that I'm passionate about is zoning. I think the city has been a victim of a disturbing trend recently. The city, in its effort to get the cost of extending utilities instead of getting it to designated zones, have allowed commercial and industrial uses as conditional uses around residential neighborhoods. I believe in the individual's right to land use, but at the same time, it has to balance with the right to land use and enjoyment of neighborhood homes. So the current comprehensive plan, I believe, is not going to suit us in the future. We have business parks and industrial zones and commercial zones adjoining neighborhoods which are low density uses. We have had requests from developers requesting for conditional uses, UDs, and rezoning for commercial, case in point next to Bass Lake Crossing, where they want to get it rezoned to commercial. So I think what we are seeing is...
Thank you, Manoj. Okay, next, Jeremy Nichols.
Thank you very much. I share some of Manoj's passion around zoning. In my view, I think we need to do all that we can to try to keep true to the city's vision, where we want to have a thriving town center, but we also want to keep the rural feel, the agricultural elements, the trails, the wildlife that have made Corcoran special for so long. And I think as this comprehensive plan has been implemented, we're at risk of losing a lot of that on the eastern side of the city. I would like to see a greater focus on trying to encourage development that keeps that cultural heritage in mind. One of the ways that we can do that is by trying to drive more developments like what the City Council recently approved in Folsom Farms, where there was a cluster of homes surrounded by conservation easements that preserved open spaces that would be kept as either working farms, woodlands, trails, and wetlands. That allows you to have a denser cluster of homes to achieve the density requirements that we have to achieve while still preserving open space that keeps Corcoran's wild habitats intact.
Thank you. And then next, Brian Lother.
Well, having been part of 3 comprehensive plans over the last number of years, I have discovered that it's really unreasonable to think that a council is going to get everything right all the time. And it's very, very difficult to predict 1 or 2 decades in advance how every square foot of a community should or is to be developed. I think with that in mind, we need to look at our ordinances and our comp plan and revisit some things that could be archaic, some things that just maybe aren't right or correct, or some things that we just didn't anticipate. And when those things come to the surface, we need to have the mechanisms in place to deal with that, to correct them, to modify them, and so forth. I do believe that the comprehensive plan really is the constitution of our city and needs to be followed. So it shouldn't just be changed haphazardly, should be done thoughtfully, but there are times where it does need to be changed.
Thank you. Now next, Jon Bottema.
Yeah, there's an old saying that the best war plans change 30 seconds into the battle. And I think it goes without saying that, you know, we put 5 years and we had tons of community meetings into that plan, and it's a foundational document on the city. But I wouldn't be so arrogant or stupid, frankly, to think that that can't change. And it changes all the time, and it's flexible. So I think it's really important to have a plan, but it's equally important enough to be able to change it and be flexible as to what's going on the ground. And I think we've been able to do that over the last 4 years.
Okay, thank you. And then George Gmach.
Thank you. I sort of have to echo what Jonathan just said. Market pressures are oftentimes more powerful than plans, and changes in the way we do business as a city and as people probably cause our comprehensive plan over 10 years to get a little bit dated. I am glad to hear that there's some interest in the open space preservation part of our plan. I'm actually the author of that, developed that part of the ordinance, and we haven't had a lot of use of it because of the economics of it. But the most recent one was a good example of how to preserve rural areas and make it better for the people who are surrounding the development, not just the ones in the development.
Thank you. Tom McKee.
Yeah, this is a very big issue for me. I think that the comprehensive plan definitely needs to be addressed. As other candidates have spoken to, there are a number of issues that over time have become antiquated and frankly just need to be updated. The community certainly needs to be a big part of that going forward, where we actually are actively engaging people to make sure that this is part of the vision of the residents of Corcoran. We've certainly seen a lot of issues related to the comprehensive plan. On the eastern side of the city, these same issues are going to start spreading throughout every corner of Corcoran if they're left unaddressed, and that needs to happen. Additionally, the areas of Corcoran that are designated for, let's say, commercial development aren't being built up because they don't have the infrastructure to support it, like water, sewer, or fire coverage is another big issue for me, firefighting service.
Thank you very much. And then Ron Thomas.
I guess, the role of the comprehensive plan is to inform the citizens and people looking at Corcoran to come into Corcoran, to inform them what the people's goal for the city is. And I think it does a quite good job of that. Just for everybody's information, we just completed our latest comprehensive plan. It was approved approximately 6 months ago or so. And it's the result of hours and hours of input from many citizens throughout Corcoran, and we're in a third iteration of it. And it does reflect to the best of people's ability what the vision of the combined vision of people for Corcoran are. I think it does a reasonably good job of that. It certainly should change as things come up. We're not going to get, as Brian said, we're not going to get every code perfectly right. We're not going to have everything nailed down, and we should be responsive to those changes and those needs. And we do, but it's a formal process that you have to go through, and we've done it before, and we'll do it again in the future. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now it's going to be our next question. And the order will be Brian Lother, Tom McKee, Ron Thomas, Jeremy Nichols, Jon Bottema, George Gmach, and then Manoj Thomas. The question is, there have been reports in the news that building permit fees from new homes could be earmarked to potentially fund new city infrastructure. What is your position on new home building permit fees and the use of their funds? And we will go ahead and get started with Brian Lother.
Well, there's been obviously a lot of tremendous growth in the city of Corcoran the last few years. So much so that there's money to be saved, I believe, by hiring our own full-time building inspector and doing it in-house rather than hiring it from outside and subcontracting it. The fees that are used by the building permits are used in a way that I believe the city has discretion and used wisdom in the past. The real issue, I believe, needs to be focused on what can we do in the future with our own in-house city planner, our own in-house inspector. And these are the areas that I think are really most important to be focused on.
Thank you. Then next, Tom McKee.
This was a major concern of mine. And as a lot of people are aware that this was in the news a lot in the last year and a half. A lot to cover in a minute here, but I would certainly encourage people to go to my website. I've written extensively about this, tommckeeformayor.com. And it's something that we need to make sure does not happen in the future. Corcoran was one of the worst offenders of this practice in the past, and it's as a new homeowner, there's something that that really bothers me, and I think it is an issue that affects a lot of people, and it upsets a lot of Corcoran residents, and we need to make sure it does not happen again.
Thank you. Ron Thomas, please.
Now, first of all, I'll take exception to the fact that Corcoran was a violator of anything at all. About a year or so ago, there was an article in the Minneapolis Star Tribune about building permit fees that was sponsored by the Minnesota Builders Association, where they were complaining that we were overcharging for it and we were misusing the fees. That since has been rebutted. There was a great article in the Corcoran News on that, and our city administrator has gone through and documented specifically where the building permit fees go and how they're used, and how there is a nexus between the fee and the charge and the services that are provided. Nothing has been changed in what we do or have done with our building permit fees. It's the same as we always have, because we were not violating anything at all. And I think that's a misstatement to say that we have been or are. And again, it's been rebutted by staff and an article in the Corcoran News that addresses it specifically. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Jeremy Nichols.
Thank you. So, as I understand the situation, in 2021, Corcoran anticipates bringing in around $800,000 in building permit fees for the homes and other structures that will be constructed in the city. The intent of those fees is to cover the cost of inspection to make sure that the city is able to adequately inspect those buildings and structures to ensure that they're safe and meet code. However, we only intend to spend $400,000 paying the consultant who does the building inspections. It means that there is an overcharge going on compared to what the costs that we will incur are. Whether that's appropriate or not, it seems that Brian Lother is correct, that it would make sense for the city, given the extreme amount of work going on in the city, to have its own internal capacity and reduce the cost that we have to pay to perform that service for those builders and for those developments. So I would advocate continuing to look at these make versus buy decisions across the city apparatus and make sure that we are being as cost effective and efficient as we can and doing as much internally as we're able to handle.
Thank you. Now, Jon Bottema.
Yeah, it's important to know, specific to this question, tons and tons of cities hang their hat on the growth of residents, and they love to get growth of residents at almost any cost. And other cities are subsidizing housing, and they're subsidizing the cost of housing, and they're making existing residents pay for new buildings and in their city. We're saving taxpayers a ton of money because we're making builders pay their own way. And it's not just in the consultants. There's a ton of staff time and internal cost to bringing in housing, and we document all of it. And that price differential is because Corcoran doesn't pay builders to come here. They got to pay their own way. And that's how it works here. And we're one of the few suburbs that actually do that.
Thank you. Now, George Gmach.
By law, the cities are supposed to limit the amount that they charge or the amount that they reclaim from the fees to something that they can actually document as administrative services that are related. And I think the city is doing that. If we could be assured that the builders would lower the price to the end buyers, I think we could put more pressure on the inspectors to lower the fees. But unfortunately, that might not get passed on to the person who actually has to pull the mortgage and pay for that inspection fee over the next 15 or 30 years. If we can't get it away from the builders, we probably should be spending it on something that's going to benefit the citizens of Corcoran. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Manoj Thomas, please.
It's an interesting piece of topic to talk about. It's been in the news cycle a bit, and I know that we've heard different point of views here. This is what I believe in. I believe that we should not be paying for builders to come in. I don't think we are looking for a residential boom here. Now, if they do come, they need to pay their way through it. What I would emphasizes if there are building fees being collected, and if it's more than what we just pay our assessor or the inspector, that needs to be used to build up capability that has been referenced here, where we bring in more in-house capability, because I am a big proponent of having the essentials in-house and have a lot of capability from the city for its residents. I think that is the best way to go. And if these buildings can pay for that, that's the way to go. I would not want to break any laws and making a slush fund out of it. That's my point on it.
Thank you. Now, for the next round of questions, the order will be Ron Thomas, Brian Lother, Jeremy Nichols, Tom McKee, George Gmach, Manoj Thomas, and then Jon Bottema. Just as a reminder, make sure that you are muted if you are not speaking, for just to make sure there's no interference. The question will be, the city of Corcoran continues to grow. This growth impacts infrastructure, schools, and traffic. If you are elected, how will you balance growth while maintaining Corcoran's green spaces and rural feel that is important to many residents? We can go ahead and get started with you, Ron Thomas.
I think a lot of the things we are doing, I think addresses that. I agree. These are major concerns. The maintaining of open space in Greater Corcoran, we've done a few things in the recent past. We've increased we work on building rights based on the acreage, and we've changed that to where it used to be 1 on 30 acres on a gravel road. We changed that to now where it's one house on 10 acres on gravel or pavement. And the idea of that is to get more houses on the larger acreage in some cases, which will preserve open space. One would probably could argue it will do that almost permanently. The other thing is, as George talked about, the open space preservation, where we cluster homes, and then we long-term preserve open space as part of those clusters. You can never say we're permanently maintaining that as open space, but long-term we will. So those are two of really the big things that the council has implemented, and I think it is and will be pretty effective.
Thank you very much. Now, Brian Lother.
Well, obviously, Corcoran is thought of as the pearl or gem of the West, and the reason is because of the open space. 45% of Corcoran is actually wetland, so there's a natural built-in, shall we say, buffer or topography that will create significant open space even within the framework of development. We obviously need a new school, elementary school, probably for the Rockford School District. That would be really welcomed by our community. How to do a school and keep open green space is tough to do as far as building and parking lots, but you do it with ball fields and celebrate other type of things that are related to the schools. Obviously, the mayor talked about cluster homes and so forth. We have some additional space and setbacks as well as open space requirements, and I think this will guarantee that we will keep an open space as we move forward.
Thank you. Next, Jeremy Nichols. And you are muted.
Thank you very much. I was double muted. Now that I'm unmuted, I feel that we need to do a lot more work trying to establish relationships with developers who prioritize this kind of open space development. Where I grew up in Baytown Township, we were adjacent to Lake Elmo, which had similar kinds of concerns about maintaining a rural feel. And their approach was to work with developers who prioritize this kind of stylistic development, where you intentionally cluster homes on one half of, say, a 200-acre parcel. And on the other 100 acres, you would allocate that as a conservation easement. It might be a working farm. It might be community supported agriculture. It might be forest and trails and ponds and things like that, that people could continue to enjoy for generations to come. But that requires a certain kind of developer, and those developers aren't currently building in Corcoran. We need to ensure that we're working within the Planning Commission to try to draw those kinds of development partnerships into the city, so that when parcels come up for sale, we have people ready and eager to build and be involved in this community to create that kind of environment for us.
Thank you very much. Tom McKee.
That's absolutely the million-dollar question. As Jeremy mentioned, I agree that we need to be working with developers that have this as a priority, and we can use the comprehensive plan and city code that is updated to guide development that plans for these type of things for green space. Fortunately, in Corcoran, we do have a lot of potential areas that could be kept if we adequately plan our city around that. I know the concern of mine and the concern of a lot of residents that I've spoken to is that if we continue to let developers do what they want completely unchecked without having those guiding principles and a guiding code, then we risk losing a lot of the green space that we have that makes Corcoran so great. So we need to really address this soon so that it doesn't become an issue throughout Corcoran.
Thank you very much. And a reminder for some of the speakers to mute after you're done to not get any feedback. Slight practice, we're doing pretty good overall. But next, George Gmach.
Most of the traffic patterns in our community come from the west and head to the east. The communities to our east tend to have more developed road structures, and so they are able to handle the traffic. So it makes sense that our comprehensive plan shows the majority of our high density development occurring in the southeast and northeast part of our community, where we actually can connect with regional roads. But also, I think we need to continue to work with our regional authorities to make sure that they're providing us with some opportunities. For instance, I understand there's problems with Hackamore and the development with Maple Grove. That would be a logical extension for Hennepin County Road 47. And I know the county is probably not going to be interested in that, but that would be something to work on.
Thank you. And now Manoj Thomas.
It's a loaded question for 60 seconds, but I'll give it a shot. With respect to development coming in and the effect of it on the infrastructure, right? Let's just take roads, for example. We have infrastructure in Corcoran that needs improvement, and that has nothing to do with development coming in. I was down Corcoran Trail. I saw roads that were put in 30 years back that are pretty much in shambles. And I had residents ask me, when will our taxes pay for improvement? So let's keep the development topic aside, right? So now those are scenarios we have to deal with. There are speeding issues in neighborhoods where people are concerned about having stop signs, the basics. With respect to roads that we need to improve, we need to have a better way to work with the county and our neighboring cities. Hackamore, Medina backed out, Maple Grove Plymouth needs to work with us. So there are options of us having to work with our friends over at other cities. School districts don't get the money they need because of the fact that builders pay their way into Wayzata school districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Jon Bottema.
Yeah, lots of things to go on there. It takes about $500,000 to build a cheap mile of road. It takes about $1 million to build a nice mile of road. And I'm tired of people using our town as a cut through. And I got hung up on, if we asphalted our roads, the state would not allow us to determine our own speed limits. They just changed the law, so we can control if we pave the speed limits on our own road, which should have been a right in the first place. Some of the things we do for rural character is we have lot width restrictions. We argue with builders about that all the time. They want to put 1 billion houses on a mile of street. And then we're the only suburb in the metro that limits the amount of houses you can put per acres. And that's a real huge benefit of living here.
Great. Thank you very much. Now for the next round of questions, the order will be Manoj Thomas, Jeremy Nichols, Tom McKee, Brian Lother, Ron Thomas, Jon Bottema, and then George Gmach. In line with the rural and developed area questions, it will be what makes you the best candidate to represent both residents in rural and developed areas of Corcoran. And why don't we go ahead with you, Manoj Thomas?
So this is a good question, and I'm glad I'm taking the first shot at this. So I live in one of the developed areas of Corcoran. I moved in there from Plymouth, and prior to that from the other areas in Northwest, the areas of Minneapolis, where it's more developed. And I moved here because I like the rural feel. I went through our mission vision statements and like, this is where I want to live, right? I want us to have our agricultural roots and preserve our natural character. So I, for one, understand what it is to live in lot sizes of 0.3 acres and looking at, walking through our other council members' houses where they have larger lot houses, and I envy them. And I think being able to speak for both these demographics would be very important, and I think I can represent them fairly accurately.
Thank you. Next, Jeremy Nichols.
This really strikes at the heart of what makes me an effective representative in general, in that it's really my core belief that it's my duty to respect everybody's perspective and the right of the person who lives on 40 acres to determine what kind of environment he wants to live in or she wants to live in versus people who live in the newer developments who might only have a quarter of an acre or less. They're both citizens of Corcoran. They both have legitimate rights to their own viewpoints, and they both deserve representation. Personally, I've lived in both kinds of spaces. I grew up on a 2.5 acre lot in an area where nobody had any regulation on anything. You could burn tires in your backyard and very few people would care because nobody was around. So I've had that kind of experience in my past. I value that kind of independence. I'm not saying that anybody should burn tires now, of course. This was 30 years ago. However, I've also lived in urban environments, and I see the value in the community aspects of being able to have kids on your street that your kids can play with, and having parks nearby that they can go to, and different kinds of recreational experiences that are available in those other environments.
Thank you. Next, Tom McKee.
I think I can represent both of those very well because I've lived in both situations. I currently live in one of the more recent developments in Corcoran, and I grew up across the street in Medina, literally across from Hackamore. Lived there since 2003, I believe. So I was here when Corcoran was pretty much all farms, and there was none of the recent developments, and I now live in one of the newer developments. So I can certainly understand both perspectives. I certainly want to represent everyone's right to do with what they want with their land and perspectives, and certainly want to make sure that we make sure the balance is there between bringing together people from both sides of Corcoran.
Thank you. Next, Brian Lother.
Well, I grew up in a small town in northern Minnesota, and then in 9th grade moved down to the Twin Cities, and I went from a class of 132 kids to a class of 3,000. So that was a cultural shock for me. I know what it's like to be in a small, closed environment and a very wide open space. I'm fortunate to live in more of an open space right now. I do believe that there are different strokes for different folks in a sense. Some people don't mind living close to each other. Other people need open spaces. I think what we need to do is adjudicate our decisions in such a manner as to not create islands of ill will within our community. And that's very important, that how we adjudicate our decisions. We won't please everyone, but we can give an audience to everyone. We can't please everyone all the time. If we try and do that, we'll never please anybody. But the best interest of the city needs to take precedence over the interest of an entity. And in that sense of the word, we can bring people together. I have a hearing ear, and I'm a bridge builder, and I believe that's what makes me a good candidate.
Thank you. Next, Ron Thomas. You're muted. Hi, Ron. You're muted right now.
All that wasted talk. I think I have the credentials to certainly represent the rural Corcoran. Yesterday we butchered chickens and I cut hay, and today I was baling hay, and we'll be harvesting grapes tomorrow. So I clearly have empathy for the rural Corcoran. As far as the urban Corcoran, I've been involved over the last 24 years on the council in the development of comprehensive plans. So we've met with with the citizens from the various areas in Corcoran, the neighborhoods, and that sort of thing. And so we've gotten good feedback from them. We've listened close to what they had to say, and I think we've responded to that. I grew up in the Plymouth area out here, and I certainly know I've witnessed the changes that have taken place, and have a good feel for that, and understand. If I look at Plymouth, I see a lot of the things that I wouldn't do that Plymouth has done, and the same for Maple Grove. So that's my background.
Thank you. And Jon Bottema, please.
Yeah, I've lived in Minneapolis. I've lived in Maple Grove. I've been here for about 10 years now. I'm just as comfortable in the boardroom as I am on my tractor. And I don't think there's this divide between urban and rural here. We all moved here. We all live here. There's something about that last stoplight before you get to Corcoran that I think we all love. The air is fresher. We have clean water. We have hills. We have tractor pulls. I think that if we focus on the things that hold us apart or hold us together instead of thinking that we're so different, we can accomplish really cool things here. I'm super excited about the energy that comes from new people moving into our town and new ideas. But I also feel like there's tons to be gained from the knowledge and experience of century farms and multi-generation families in this town. So I think I'm at home with either side.
And George Gmach.
I'm really fortunate to be able to live on land that my grandparents bought over 100 years ago. I wouldn't trade it for an urban environment, but I've lived in an urban environment in the past for about 5 years when I was just getting started. I think that it's important for those that are in the urban environment to have access to a rural environment. One of the ways we do that is with our trail systems. As we do development, we need to have connectivity between our urban areas and our parks and our rural areas so that people who do want to get out and enjoy the open spaces can do that with a safe ride on the bike. My wife and I ride about 30 miles 2 or 3 times a week, and we really enjoy getting out in the rural areas and riding through urban areas in some cases as well. So I think there is a way to bridge the two. There's a way to deal with walkable communities and quality of life in communities that are more dense.
Thank you very much. Now to the next question. The order will be Jeremy Nichols, Tom McKee, Brian Lother, Jon Bottema, Manoj Thomas, Rod Thomas, and George Gmach. The question will be this: what steps do you believe the City Council can do to work with the police department in addressing policing reforms, funding, and training to better serve Corcoran's community? And you can go ahead, Jeremy Nichols.
What an excellent, timely question. As I've been out and about in Corcoran, meeting people in the neighborhoods, people seem to really admire and respect the police presence that we keep. The police are very careful to always stop and talk to residents. There's a good level of community building that's part of what they do on a day-to-day basis. People are thankful for the police stopping by, chatting with them, parking at the end of their driveway, and they might even point out particular speeders on the road once in a while. And I think that kind of a healthy rapport between the police department and the citizenry is extremely important. And that's the kind of thing that's missing from a lot of larger cities, where the police might treat residents as a more adversarial population. In Corcoran, I don't think that's the case. And I think we should try to prioritize that in the hiring process as we bring new officers onto the force. As we train people, we want to train them so that they're trying to prioritize that community feeling. And this is your neighbor, not an adversary in the community. I also admire that we're looking toward using body cameras and additional technology to make sure that there's accountability on both sides.
Thank you very much. Reminder for everybody, make sure to mute yourselves. When we're in speaker view, if you're not muted, you may end up being the main one on the screen. when you're not talking. So we just want to make sure that's still the case. Back to the question. Tom McKee, please.
Yeah, I think the police department does as good a job as anyone in Corcoran with communicating with residents and business owners and having that connection and doing outreach with the community. And I think that is absolutely critical to anything that the government does. I also think that the recent steps the city has taken with purchasing cameras and upgrading some of the equipment that police have, I think is great for both sides accountability and for making sure things are things from both perspectives, police and from people that they interact with, things are adequately addressed.
Thank you. And then Brian Lother.
Having lived in both an urban environment as well as more of a rural environment, probably the biggest contrast that we have in Corcoran is that our police department is very personal. They know many of the residents by name, and many other police departments are very impersonal. And I just believe that our police department is working in a very healthy way. I'm very committed to funding the police in whatever way they need to be funded in order to be safe, in order to do the job that they're hired to do. We live in difficult times. It's an incredible time that we're living in, and the police do not feel safe. I'm committed to doing everything we can to make them feel safe. We have a couple of positions that are opening up in the next couple of years, and I can assure you the lineup for people wanting to come here to be police are going to be really, really deep because of how great our police department is.
Thank you. And Jon Bottema.
Yeah, I'm an EMT myself, so I support deeply all our first responders, police officers, fire department, ambulance. We were named the safest city in Minnesota. I don't know if everybody knows that or not, but we have an awesome police department. And I kind of cringe at the word or the phrase police reform, as if things are so structurally bad that we have to change things. And I reject that. Our police department is phenomenal, like all things that involved humans. We're imperfect at it, which doesn't mean they can't get better. But those guys do an awesome job at keeping us safe, responding. I'm grateful for them.
Thank you. Manoj Thomas.
There we go. It's a tough act to follow, John, because I know he's as passionate about our PD as I am. I am a reserve officer with the Corcoran PD, so I speak from out of experience, both having my brothers that I work with, as well as going out to the community and talking to them. We love our community, and the community loves us. I know Brian mentioned that there's fear among the cops, not in Corcoran. We are not afraid of our residents. We go out there. We have family, kids wave us down, flag us down. We love our interactions with them. So we want to continue keeping that. Technology is a great thing. We want to have body cams to protect us. Right? There are times when technology is going to be aiding us, but this is a city where we do that thing right. And the lowest crime rate is one of the reasons we checked before we moving into Corcoran. So we love the city for everything it does, and that's the first agency I interacted with to serve. I love our cops, and I think we do a great job here.
Thank you. Ron Thomas.
I think, first of all, as everybody echoes, and I'm sure everyone believes it strongly, is we have just a great police department. We're very blessed to have what we have here in Corcoran. The things we can do, I think, to help them is to fund them adequately, and that's a challenge because right now they're about half of our budget, and we just need to grow the income stream through getting industrial commercial properties into Corcoran to increase the cash that we have available for that. Right now we have, I don't know if anybody's aware, but we have only 2 supervisors in the police department, and they have to be on call 24/7. 2 people being on call 24/7 puts a lot of stress on people. They're in the process now of trying to fix that by adding another sergeant to the force, but that adds cost to the budget. We're also short of people. We have two police officers out, and we currently will be opening up 2 spots for replacements in the very near future, and that's going to be, I think, plenty of people. Thank you.
Thank you. And George Gmach.
The only people that don't like our police department are the people that drive impaired or otherwise are doing something that they shouldn't. I think our community and our police department have a good working relationship. I know I volunteer with the firearm safety training program and have for the last 16 years, and about half the officers are involved in that program at one time or another. I think I agree with the idea of continuing to fund. About 16 years ago, something like that, we had to fight to keep our police department because we had some elected people that were going to contract with the county. Unfortunately, then what happens is you get somebody that's assigned to our area and they don't stick. They're all over the Hennepin County area. They don't get to know the people. We have community policing at its best here in Corcoran, and we need to preserve it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next round of questions, the order will be Tom McKee, Ron Thomas, Jon Bottema, George Gmach, Manoj Thomas, Brian Lother, and then Jeremy Nichols. The question is, as Corcoran grows, does Corcoran need to have a diversity plan to address any future racial gender equity issues? What would your suggestions be? And we can go ahead and start with you, Tom McKee.
It's a big question. I think that's always something you need to be conscious of going forward, especially as our community continues to become more diverse. My hope would be that as we increase communication between all residents, that any possibilities of groups feeling not represented decreases. But certainly as the community grows, those are issues that you need to continuously be mindful of and address to make sure that those never arise. Because everyone needs to be represented, and that's I think what everyone that's here tonight firmly believes.
Thank you. Ron Thomas.
I guess my opening statement would be, no, I don't believe we need a diversity plan. I think we need to be very sensitive to the diverse population that we're getting in Corcoran. But I think maybe it's my ignorance, but the way to address that is to really develop a community in Corcoran, develop a community feel, have activities. Nights Unite is an example, Corcoran Night Out, Corcoran Country Days, a lot of those things. To really be proactive on getting people involved. We have 5 school districts, which makes it very hard for us to have a community feel. Like nurturing the Rockford School District to get more houses, rooftops in Rockford School District, which will result in a school here in Corcoran. We'll do a lot of help for that. But just in general, I think it should be built into our fabric of accepting people. And it's difficult in Corcoran because people live on large acreages and they're not used to reaching out to people. And I think we do have to be sensitive to that and work at it. But I don't know that requires a diversity plan. You know, maybe I'm objecting to formalizing of it, and I shouldn't be, but I'd be certainly open to hearing about it.
Thank you. Next, Jon Bottema.
I don't want to sound cynical, but to me, a diversity plan sounds like something that the left cooks up in universities in the city of Minneapolis and Hennepin County forces upon everybody. I'm not superficial enough to think that diversity only means skin color or gender. We all come from different families. We all come from different places. And I don't think we need to segment us. I don't think segmenting us by race or superficial issues is good for anybody. And I think it causes more harm than good when you focus on such meaningless statistics and meaningless characteristics when you use that as your only definition of diversity. So I think we need diverse thought and background and ideas. And I think we've got that, and we all should be open to that.
Thank you. George Gmach.
I'm not sure it's the city's role to develop a formal plan. I think I agree with what the mayor said about being sensitive to people coming from various backgrounds and with different ethnic, racial, or other issues that make them different from what we're traditionally exposed to here in Corcoran, which historically has been pretty white and pretty Christian. I think we're really looking to let the community do some of that diversity improvement through our churches. We want people to assimilate. That means us reaching out and the folks that are coming in being receptive to becoming part of the community rather than forming their own internal communities. Thank you.
Next, Manoj Thomas.
I think it's going to be a quick answer. Maybe not. No, we don't need one. It's a minority report kind of a question. Planning for something that would happen and posting for it. I am a racial minority. I came into Corcoran. I didn't feel like you didn't have a plan to get me introduced into the city. I made friends. I think I can call at least 4 people on the screen as my friends. So with respect to do we need a plan? No. What we need to do better is we are growing as a city. There are people coming in, irrespective of race, gender, or color, creed. They are new. I think we need to get a way to engage them. I had seniors who moved into Bellwether telling me that the only interaction they've had after moving to the city was the police, who came and said hi and were nice. I think the city needs to be more deliberate in going there and introducing ourselves. But other than that, I think this is a great city and we don't need a plan. Thank you.
Okay, Brian Lother. And you are muted, Brian.
My apologies. Again, I'm going to put on my clerical robe here because I believe all people are made in the image of God and we get our value from being made in that image. And so prejudice, I believe, is something that's learned and it needs to be unlearned. We need to see the value of each other. I'm not sure that we actually need a diversity plan that's headed up by our city, but as one of the local clergy in town, I'm heading that up weekly in my own congregation to champion the truth that all people have value, regardless of their behavior, regardless of their skin color, regardless of how they believe. And so when we see prejudice in ourselves, or we see it in other people who, especially that we have a relationship with, well, we need to be willing to address it and find out why is it there and what can we do to basically eradicate it. And so do I believe we need a diversity plan in Corcoran? I don't believe we do, but I believe we always need to be aware of it on a personal level.
Okay. And now Jeremy Nichols.
Such wonderful answers. Good jobs, gentlemen. I believe with the rest of you that the city is getting more diverse with the population at large. That's a natural thing that's going to happen in society all across America, and that's not a bad thing. What we have to focus on is what does that do to Corcoran? My belief is that neighbors will always have common interests. And it doesn't matter what the race or gender or other difference I have with my neighbor, we're always going to have a shared interest in the success of our neighborhood, of our community, of our city. The city's role in all of this is secondary. The city's role is to provide essential services and protect the rights of the residents. If there are people being negatively impacted, that's really more of a county issue. The county has many programs to do with human suffering in all of its various forms, but the city's role is to provide essential services. So I don't believe the city necessarily needs that. I think we do need to be cognizant when we have, say, minority businesses coming into Corcoran, that we're treating them well, like we should be treating all of our businesses so that they can grow and prosper the way that any business owner or property owner in the city ought to be able to do.
Thank you. Now for the next question, the order will be Jon Bottema, Manoj Thomas, Ron Thomas, Brian Lother, Jeremy Nichols, George Gmach, and Tom McKee. The question is, what role should a city play in a pandemic? Now you can go ahead, Jon Bottema.
What role should the city play in a pandemic? I think we just were in one. So the role that the city played was, I think, the right one in that we did what we could as a city in at least shutting down what we could and having people take precautions. What we do have, and for those of us on city council, we do emergency preparedness plans for humongous acute emergencies such as tornadoes and train derailments. In this case, I like the cities to have freedom to do what they think is best for the people that live here. But I think a global pandemic, a city government is sort of neutered in its response. It's left to people above us, and we can do just what we can do.
Thank you. Manoj Thomas.
It's funny when you say pandemic and everybody goes to COVID, because it could be anything. It just says that we are stuck at home for too long. But having said that, I think the city's job would vary by the pandemic we're in. And if you take an example of COVID, because that's what everybody has in their mind, I think our role is educational, to make sure our residents know what's the right thing to do, what are the protocols, and then lead by example. So make sure that we do what we are advocating them to do. So that education is one, and preparedness. I think John referred to that. Our city had a plan. We had a plan way before the governor asked us to put one in. So the thing is to make sure that the city is prepared for its residents, to keep them safe. At the same time, leading by example and educating the residents is the major role that we need to play, and have how our first responders ready to act on our plan. That would be my 2 points.
Thank you. Ron Thomas.
I think that the role of the city, I think, is very localized. I think the role of the council is to make sure that our city administrator has the authority to take action as he needs it without having to wait for council meetings and formalize stuff. The huge benefit that Corcoran has had as our director of public safety, Matt Gotchek, is remarkably plugged into the emergency preparedness scene. He's kind of one of the leaders in the state in that area, and really does a great job. And they've done, and they should be coordinating with all the surrounding communities to make sure that as resources are needed by other cities, we help supply them, and that there's a sharing of those resources. And they've done quite a remarkable job in that. As far as police officers being out and cities reaching out and helping each other. Also, the role of the city is to make sure that we don't expose our critical resources or critical assets of people to the in this case to the disease.
Thank you. Brian Lother.
Well, I believe the city's role is to set an example by what we do. Obviously, there's been huge debates to mask or not to mask. That's a question. When the whole pandemic was on the horizon, I mistook the fact that I thought this was going to be something that would bring our country together. And you can tell I'm not a prophet, because it would just the opposite happen. And so, but the fact of the matter is, I think it still gets back to, even as a city, there are principles we need to live by. And one of those principles is we need to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. So we need to think of others before we think of ourselves. And so I believe we need to treat people how we would want to be treated. And in that regards, when it comes to the COVID or pandemic, we need to be mindful of our actions could and would affect other people. So we need to lead by example and do it in a very conservative way.
Thank you. Jeremy Nichols.
I'm going to go one step farther and say that in addition to leading by example, I think we need to illustrate, in the case of COVID, for example, where we have a large group of people who disagree about the scope and nature of what's going on, to try to make people aware of what's going on in the community because of that pandemic. Now, hypothetically, let's say COVID, if we have people who are affected within Corcoran by COVID, to the extent that HIPAA allows, of course, we need to make people aware that there are people in the community who have been diagnosed and are either recovering or not recovering, to help make it real for people who might be believing disinformation so that they can behave in responsible ways. If they're aware that there's no outbreak in Corcoran, they might behave very differently than if they're aware that there's a lot of people who are sick. And that might help us to have a stronger leadership position within the region. I also think that we need to make sure that we are staffed and resourced in a way that we can continue to provide all of the essential services the city has to provide, even in light of the pandemic. That means being cautious with people and protective equipment and making sure we have backups in place.
Thank you. George Gmach.
Well, as a COVID survivor, I can speak to this issue. I did everything that the rules say you should do. I wore the mask in public. I wore the mask in the store. I wiped off the grocery carts and washed my hands when I got home, but I still got it. Nobody else got it from me, however. I stayed away from everybody else. And I think in terms of the city's role, I think it's to make sure that our emergency response folks are supplied with the right equipment, that they're given the proper training, that they are made aware that when they respond to a household, they need to put the mask on and be aware that they could be exposed depending on where they're going and what the call is about. Those are the folks that are really on the front lines, and those are the ones that we have to try to protect. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tom McKee.
Yeah, I think the city's role in terms of outreach and education and communication is critical. In terms of some of the decisions that, as others have mentioned, like if you're using COVID as the example, mask mandates, those are often made at a level higher than the city, the state or federal government. But I'd also like to mention that there are other aspects related to, for instance, COVID, like the CARES Act, that we could have better utilized to support small businesses and residents throughout Corcoran in a number of ways that it's a little difficult to fully address in under a minute here. But I think that the economic impacts and other impacts related to pandemics need to be something that the city looks a lot at.
Thank you. Good news for you, everyone here. We're at the last question. So the order for the last question will be George Gmach, Jon Bottema, Manoj Thomas, Ron Thomas, Tom McKee, Jeremy Nichols, and Brian Lother. Last question is there an issue that wasn't discussed in this forum that you would like to address? And why don't we start with you, George Gmach?
Okay, this is perhaps a smaller issue, but it is one that I'd like the city to explore, and that's the possibility of having detached accessory dwelling units in some of the rural areas. We already do allow some of that with mother-in-law apartments. That's kind of what they've been called when they're attached to the home. But I think that's one of the ways we could look at providing rental income for people that are older to stay in the community. It also is a place where families could have either the younger generation or the older generation in a separate unit, depending on their needs. And I don't think that it's something that we would have a problem with in terms of the community being hurt by it. Thank you.
Thank you. Jon Bottema.
Yeah, I think a lot of the questions that we covered were kind of outward looking at the community. And I would like to talk about inward. How do we make this government better? How do we make the internals of this government better? I am an analyst by trade, so I'm in and out of spreadsheets and budgets. And some things that we've done, our credit rating has increased over the last couple of years, which has saved the taxpayers tons and tons of money. And how we do that and what we need to focus on continually is scouring the budget for savings, looking internally, are there ways we can save money? An example cited here was, can we hire internally? And we've done that a couple times, and we have to do the cost benefit analysis of that. But we've got to manage the budget, and we've got to get sufficient tax revenue, and we're doing that.
Thank you. Manoj Thomas.
Maybe I should meet John to answer that question on how things can improve in the government. But to answer the question I have to answer right now, there are two things that we didn't talk about. We didn't talk about Maple Hill Estates. I think that is a good example of affordable housing we have in Corcoran. It is a large part of our population, and we need to look at how we can improve both programs and the process and livelihoods of people who live in that section of Corcoran. We did not talk about trails and parks. We have had a lot of senior residents who moved into the city at Bellwether and not by design into MI Homes, into Bass Lake Crossing, and they are like trail systems and parks are something they are looking at. So those are two smaller topics that I would say is a priority that we look into also, along with the big ones we talked. Thank you.
Thank you. Ron Thomas.
It's not a major issue. It has been in the past, but one of these we didn't talk about, which is an interesting one, is our roads, more specifically our gravel roads in Corcoran, and the immense amount of traffic that's coming through, and it's pass-through traffic. I think as John alluded to earlier, many of our gravel roads are getting upwards of 700 plus trips per day on them, and gravel roads should be paved, or the recommendation from experts are that you, quote experts, that you pave a road if it has over 120 trips per day. So I think we need to continue to push forward, and that's one of the strategic goals of the council. But we've had that on our goals for the last 20 years, and I think we've paved maybe one short stretch of gravel roads since I've been on the council. I think we need to continue looking at that, and the staff is looking at that and doing some good work on it. And hopefully we will be addressing that and with some action in the near term. So.
Thank you. Tom McKee.
Yeah, there's one big issue that I definitely want to mention, and that is the city's lack of firefighting capability. It's a huge concern of mine and a huge concern of a lot of residents that I've spoken to over the last couple months. Currently, as many people know, we contract out with 3 neighboring fire departments for our coverage. And a couple of years ago, a study was commissioned, but basically said we do not have adequate response time coverage from these neighboring departments. And it's no fault of their own. It's as their communities are growing and their needs are becoming bigger as well as ours. It's not a situation that can last into the future. It's something we need to address. There were multiple options actually in that same study given for how we can address it in terms of staffing, equipping, and locating a fire station. And that has not been prioritized currently. I think it should be number 1 on our list ahead of something like a city hall remodel that we're going forward with now.
Thank you. Jeremy Nichols.
Thank you. I think one untapped area we didn't really touch on is how we react to growth in terms of working with our partner agencies. So for example, many of the major roads in Corcoran are county roads, but the county hasn't been actively engaged and solicited in developing those roads in accordance with our comprehensive plan and overall growth objectives. So I think we need to do a better job of working within the county structure to make sure that while we're paying all of these county taxes, virtually none of that money is coming back to be invested in Corcoran's infrastructure. And I think we can do a better job of advocating for ourselves to get upgrades on things like County 101 to deal with the influx of traffic we're going to see due to the Dayton Parkway interchange starting to dump traffic onto 101 from 94. I think we're going to see a lot more traffic coming north to south in the future, and the roads simply aren't equipped to handle that. We need to make sure that we're working proactively with the county to make sure that they are maintaining their roads adequately.
And Brian Lother.
Well, what I'd like to bring up is actually, I wouldn't define it as an issue, but actually a strength. And that's the financial strength of our city. I believe the state of the city is really very good at this time. The financial strength and bond strength is actually overwhelmingly good for a city our size. There's an old adage, don't fix something that's not broke. We've been able to do a bond issue just recently that was done at less than 1%. And I just don't know very many cities our size that actually can do that. I think if there was one maybe issue that I would like to see is how do we present a sense of community between people who just recently moved here and people who are third generation residents? How can we get the East to, in a sense, focus westward? And how can we get people in the West to focus eastward? And so if we could do some things intentionally about that, I think that would really help our community come together in a positive way.
Thank you very much. At this point, we do conclude the question and answer, and we will be calling you for your closing statements. For the audience, I will be reminding the different positions that you are running for, since we have 3 different positions that are within one forum. The order of the closing statements, and as a reminder, it is also 2 minutes. It's going to be Manoj Thomas, Jeremy Nichols, Brian Lother, Jon Bottema, George Gmach, Tom McKee, and Ron Thomas. Now, to start, we will have Manoj Thomas, Corcoran City Council candidate, say his closing statement.
In my closing statement, I'd like to call out the key issues that I believe we need to address over the next few years. If elected, I will make it a priority to go through this list working with you. We need to look at our budget and make sure we are getting the most out of our investments. We need to focus on technology to reduce operating costs. We need to prioritize the city infrastructure that serves our residents over facility improvements like a city hall renovation. That can wait. We have put in the effort to understand the consolidated impact of ongoing developments enabled through patchwork zoning. We have to try and reverse some bad decisions where we can and not blame it on old zoning. We need to support and grow our commercial tax base to reduce the tax burden on our residents. We need a better model for development that protects and preserves our open spaces while working collaboratively with partner agencies. The current cookie cutter approach from nearby cities is not right for us. And finally, we have to increase the proactive engagement of the council with residents and our business owners. We need to come together as a community, and the public-private partnership will be the key to this. You have heard various key topics that affect our lives being discussed here today, and we have to ask ourselves what makes sense to you. The current policies and decisions of the city speak louder than what you have heard them say here today. Join me if you believe the city needs to change direction on how it has handled land uses. Join me if you believe your leaders need to be more responsive of your needs and show up when it matters. Join me if you believe there is a need for transparency and accountability within the city. Help me to return our city to its original vision and mission. Let's work together to keep our city a place we can be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, we have Jeremy Nichols, Corcoran City Council Special Election candidate.
Thank you, Lillian. I'd very much to thank the League for preparing and presenting this event so the citizens of Corcoran have the opportunity to meet us virtually as they make their choices. Thank you to the volunteers who helped put this together with us tonight. I also want to thank my wife, Sarah, and my 2 girls, Lily and Evie, for being so supportive as I have worked to meet people and learn their needs and how best to meet them. My number 1 goal as a counselor will be to identify resident needs and make sure they are represented on the council. I want to make sure the city remains financially solid and manages growth carefully so we can live up to the vision that we have to preserve our rural lifestyle and natural environment. We're in a position now where Corcoran is going to grow and develop, but we get to decide how that happens. We need to be creative and build the partnerships to ensure that we are the ones shaping that growth. By building relationships with the right builders and developers and helping them connect with the people who are looking to move on or sell, we increase the chances of keeping Corcoran's rural feel, natural areas, and wildlife for future generations to enjoy. My background is leading teams of people who are passionate about what they do to greater success by working together collaboratively and finding the best possible solutions to challenging problems. I know that Corcoran will face many challenges in the years ahead, and I look forward to having the chance to play a role in solving them, giving residents a seat at the table when important decisions that affect them are made. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is jeremy@votejeremynichols.com. Or if you'd like to know more about me and my positions, you can visit my website, votejeremynichols.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Brian Lother, Corcoran City Council Special Election candidate.
Well, thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. As we come down the home stretch toward Election Day, it's often customary to hear from those who want wholesale changes at City Hall how terrible things are in our city. But I want us all to be reminded of some of the accomplishments of our current City Hall and leadership. We have a beautiful bellwether development that is really the envy of a lot of senior developments in the Twin Cities. We have a Ravinia development that's soon to be finished and accomplished here in the southeast corner of our city, which is a great asset to our city. We have Bass Lake Crossing on both sides, both the north and south side of County Road 10, and a new Tavera development on the west side of 116. All of this is because of the current leadership that we have in our city. Our city council has also implemented a long-term financial plan, not typical of a community or city our size. It's created a strong bond rating. It's allowed us to bring sewer and water into our city without a cost to the current residents who are not serviced by it. I'm very proud of our city and the accomplishments that it's made in the last 23 years that I've lived here. It's not that there hasn't been mistakes, but our current council is navigating a course and direction that is stable, it's fair, and it's economically sound. My ear will always be attuned to the voices of reason in our community. I am a bridge builder. I will do my best to consider all sides of an issue. I will always give you an audience, and your voice will be heard by me. I will do my best to listen to what you think is a reasonable solution to an existing problem or an existing concern. I'm not only concerned about one area of the city, but I'm concerned about the entire city of Corcoran because everybody needs to have a voice. I personally built things in our community, and it's my hope that I have earned your respect as well as your confidence enough for you to vote for me, allowing me to serve you on the City Council of Corcoran. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next, Jon Bottema, Corcoran City Council candidate.
Yeah, first off, I want to second all the accomplishments that Brian mentioned. People ask, what's the heart of Corcoran? And although we're running for government, the heart of this town is the organizations, the JCs, the Lions, Northwest Trails, the Garden Club. This town is led by the people. There are tons and tons of talented people in this town. It's what I love about it. My website is www.Bottema for Corcoran. We're all in this together. Me, my wife, my 5 kids, we're going to be here for a long time. Going forward, next 4 years, I promise, like I always have, to listen to the people and be effective at communication. I promise to pour my heart and soul into this job. Ask anybody who's talked to me, and I'm passionate about 100% of everything we're about here in Corcoran. I will continue to stand up for what I believe in. And although I want this government to be small, I'll work like crazy to continue to make it better. And it's really important. We all love Corcoran. I do too. As always, contact me about everything and anything you might want to talk about. And I really would appreciate your vote. And again, I think a Bottema for Corcoran yard sign would look really pretty in your yard. Thank you and have a good night.
Okay, next, George Gmach, Corcoran City Council candidate.
Wow. All I can say is that I'm impressed with all of the candidates that are running, either running against me or with me or or whatever. I think whoever loses in this particular election should stay involved in the city of Corcoran in one capacity or another. If it's not the city council, maybe it's the planning commission. I think we already have one that's on the charter commission. Welcome aboard. So I think, you know, when I look at Corcoran, I believe that the present council has us on the right track for the most part. I think there are always things we can look at. I've been involved in the city for 40 years and I'm still learning, and I intend to continue to learn if I'm elected. I'll listen if anybody has concerns, but I won't promise that I'm going to do exactly what you ask me to do. I'm going to look at what's best for the community as a whole. I'm going to consider all of the options that might be available, and if I can help you out, I certainly will. But again, I will listen. And I will say that I've bent the ear of the council within the last couple of years a couple of times, and every one of them to a person responded. and they responded with a thoughtful response. They explained what they were doing and why they were doing it. And I think that is an important aspect, to make sure that if you're not doing exactly what somebody thinks you should do, give them a good reason why you're not doing it, so that they have a better understanding and can live with the situation, perhaps for a little while at least. Thank you, and I won't have any yard signs up. I quit that 20 years ago. But I'd like your vote, and I will serve for the next 4 years if I'm elected. Thank you, and thanks for the League of Women Voters for hosting this.
Okay. And then next, Tom McKee, Corcoran Mayor candidate.
Yeah, I definitely want to thank the League of Women Voters and all the other candidates and everyone at home who took the time to listen to us tonight. This was great. I really appreciate it. I certainly want to mention my website, tommckeeformayor.com. I'll be discussing these issues and plenty others. My email is tom@tommckeeformayor.com. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'd love to discuss this or anything else with you guys. But I'll leave everyone with this. We have a truly amazing community here in Corcoran, and by just refocusing and making sure that we're addressing resident-chosen, common-sense community needs, we can make sure that our town's an even better place to live and to do business. By addressing the issues with a city code and comprehensive plan, we can guide beneficial growth and keep the residential property tax burden low while preserving Corcoran's rural nature. I will work always to improve the communication between residents and business owners and everyone in Corcoran, and be proactive and engaging and working with the community on addressing those needs. I will always strive to provide honest and transparent, respectful leadership. And it's with deep roots and immense city pride that I ask for your vote as mayor. It would truly be an honor to represent those most invested in our city's future, the residents of Corcoran. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ron Thomas, Corcoran Mayor candidate.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this on. It's really a great forum, and it's a super opportunity for all of the candidates to get out there. I'm really appreciative of the candidates who are running. It's really encouraging to see this involvement in the city, and I believe it or not, I do appreciate when I'm criticized by people. I think I can always learn to do things better, and I think by being open and sharing with people and critical to some extent, if it's constructive, we can all be better and serve the citizens a lot better. I've been on the council for the last 20 of the last 22 years, and believe that I've demonstrated a commitment for the city to serve the Corcoran and make it a better place for the current residents and the future generations. The last 4 budgets have resulted in a decrease in the tax rate for citizens, and the city's financial strength has never been better. We have over 35% cash reserve, which exceeds the requirements of the financial community for city governance. In the last 2 years, specifically, among many other accomplishments, we've completed the design guidelines, the Southwest District that includes details for new downtown Corcoran. I'm very excited about that, and if you haven't looked at that, I encourage you to look at it. The really great part of it to me is it includes a 5-acre park, which is the plan is to have it surrounded by retail, shops and residences and that sort of thing, and it'll be available for citizens to participate in various activities and events from the community, and I think can be a real community builder. An example of things that I would foresee for would be a farmer's market, a great way to bring the urban and the rural together in Corcoran. We're in the final stages of hiring an in-house planner. I know it's been mentioned, and we also are developing our own water system. Again, thank you for your support in the past, and I ask for your vote in the future, and hope that I can continue to serve you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, this concludes the Corcoran Mayor and City Council Candidate Forum. Thank you to all the candidates, the League of Women Voter volunteers, and those viewing this event on cable and video, all for your participation in this candidate forum. Thank you very much to the City of Corcoran for supporting this event. On-demand viewing can be accessed at www.lwvwpa.org, as well as the League of Women Voters Wayzata Plymouth Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. Please remember to vote in the November 3rd general election by absentee ballot or in person. Your vote is your voice. The League of Women Voters welcomes new members, both women and men. Please visit us at www.lwvwpa.org for more information. Thank you and good night. And we